Hello, I'm Gail Marie. Apart from the obvious traits of look, smell, taste, touch and sound, there are biological reasons why we're attracted to someone, and it's often found deep in our ancestral DNA. However, the traits that keep us attracted or emotionally connected with someone are much closer to home. They can be traced back to our environment, right from the time we're babies. We're an open vessel for absorbing patterns and behaviours. We're born open and receptive to our own environment. As we begin to view the world when we're young, we adopt our patterns from the people around us. And up until the age of 7, we are constantly observing and absorbing from our environment without even questioning. This means that we adopt the patterns from those closest to us, which are usually our parents. So if our parents have a loving, harmonious relationship and communicate really well and they're balanced people, then we absorb those patterns and we're likely to become just like that. When we have parents that are unbalanced, their relationships are in turmoil, they can't communicate and they're in conflict all the time, then that becomes the basis for our relationship from that very early age. It's not only for a lover but also for a boss or a friend. These are all moulded on our early experiences at home. It's what we know. This isn't about blame, it's about how we become who we are. We may have our own personalities and we're all individuals in our own right, but we do share patterns of behaviour down through the generations. This isn't only particular to humans, but to animals as well. For instance, when cubs are born, they're protected by their parent and eventually taught to hunt. This isn't only a skill, it's a passed down trait. They're shown by example and they absorb what their parent demonstrates and they copy. We're similar too in that we copy our parents' behaviours. It's not only what we see them do, but their responses, how they feel about themselves, and what their parameters for self-love are. Studies revealed on a group of 17-year-old schoolgirls showed that 70% thought it was okay for their partner to hit them under certain circumstances. This may not be typical, but what is frightening is that it wasn't even a low socio-economic background. It was a working class rural background who were believed to be partially balanced. We don't need to come from an abusive family to attract abusive people into our lives. In fact, there are many different patterns of behaviour that get passed down through the generations. Not all of them are abusive, but they will attract people into our lives that don't have our highest good at their heart. For instance, when we witness our mother running around after family members, including our father, without thanks or appreciation, we're absorbing disrespect. One of two things happens. We either compute that within our minds as respect because our mother has told us that this is what respect is because she respects herself, or we reject it. If we're a boy, we're also taught that this is how we respect somebody, by the way our father sets this example. If we have a tendency to align ourselves with our mother's traits as opposed to our father's, then we have just delineated the boundaries of respect for ourselves. It now means that we give and give without thanks or gratitude. That becomes our inner definition of respect. As we get older, we may question this definition that's buried way down deep, but until it presents itself as a problem, we won't even notice. In fact, we usually come up with the excuse, that's just how I am. Another example which happened to me is that my mother worried incessantly. When I was young, she worried I was going to be kidnapped. As I had my own children, she would call me to make sure I was watching them so they didn't go missing. It wasn't the only scenario of her worrying. She worried about money, she worried about my father, she worried about decisions, she worried about other people. I adopted that pattern willingly. It was just what I did. It wasn't until I was well in my 30s that I decided that none of the things I worried about were within my control. And it certainly didn't make me feel good. In fact, I was falling apart. It had become a protection mechanism. I felt that if I didn't worry about it, it was likely to happen. At least if I worried, I could cover my bases. I could have a solution ready in my mind. How is that for warped logic? Instead, I eventually looked for another protection mechanism and I began meditation. I began writing and going within. When I began this process, it opened up a new world to me. I attracted people who helped me on my journey and felt peace, real peace, for the first time within. In fact, I hadn't realised that worry had undermined my whole existence until it was gone. It was a friend that said to me, "Gail, you fester things. Either do something about the situation or let it go." So I took that on board and I still use it today. If there's something I don't like, I either make a decision to do something about it or I let it go. Thank you to whoever said that, because I have no idea who you are and it made a difference. We often get great advice from people who we don't know who they are. Adopted patterns always take on the guise of something noble and wonderful, such as worry posing as concern and subservient posing as respect. Sexual abuse being an example of love, and worthlessness posing as caring. The list goes on, but what does that have to do with who we attract? There are 4 reasons we attract who we do. The first one is our inner DNA springs to life and we're attracted because of our need to breed. It's underlying, it's innate. The second is our emotional need to fill a gap. There hasn't been any closure with a parent that we had contention with, so the role needs to be reenacted for closure. So we find somebody to fill that role. It would be wonderful if we realised we just needed closure, rather than repeating the same abuse cycle over and over, but often we don't. When we're used to playing a particular role, then we need a partner who's willing to play that as well. And this is where the sign on our backs comes in. It's actually written in vibrational ink. It's huge. It could be in Vegas and it's the size of a neon light and it says, "Pick me." And even though we may want somebody in our hearts that loves and cares for us, the vibration of that sign will only attract those who are willing to fulfill the role. And it's not the role we want, it's the role we're advertising for. Number 3 is situational, looking to fulfill a situation. For instance, a sugar daddy, someone that will take care of us so that we aren't lacking in anything financial. It's looking for security in all the wrong places and is very connected to the emotional. And the 4th one is past life. We often attract people we've been partners with in past lives. This could be to fulfill an unfinished journey or to collaborate on a bigger project this lifetime. But you could write a book on this topic. In fact, if you'd like to know more, Brian Weiss has written a book and it's called Only Love is Real. Even our wonderfully balanced relationships are mainly based in emotional, but we cross over into biological traits and past life, and if that's a part of our journey. So we have a mixed bag of people that we attract. The partner we're with doesn't necessarily have to become our partner for life. Sometimes they're there to assist us with moving from one phase of life to the next, even the horrible ones. It's closure with this stage of life that's often missing. Therefore, the relationships repeat themselves because we don't have that closure, sometimes with the same person and often with another person, as relationships are repeated time and time again, often generation and generation again. In the meantime, we have children and they adopt the patterns that we're demonstrating, not the patterns that we want them to, but the patterns that we're showing them are us. We don't teach with our words. We teach only by example. We owe it not only to ourselves to feel great, but we owe it to our children to give them the very best of us, our greatest example of life. And we can then bring out the best in them and those around us. In fact, the best we could give anybody is the best of us.